Hello, I'm Nikita Keegan, and welcome to the WACA Candidates Forum for the 7th Middlesex State Representative seat. This evening, we have 4 candidates who will be sharing their vision of how they will serve the people of Ashland and Framingham in that capacity. We have, starting here, Yolanda Greaves, Jack Patrick Lewis, Phil Jack, and Brett Walker. Speaking order has been determined before the broadcast, and that speaking order is Yolanda Greaves, Jack Patrick Lewis, Phil Jack, and Brett Walker. But before we get started, I'm going to run through some of the ground rules for this evening. First, our candidates will have 5 minutes to speak, after which they will immediately answer up to 3 questions from the audience. For the audience and their questions, please remember, 1 person, 1 question. The same person cannot ask a follow-up question. There are folks in our overflow area this evening, and they are welcome to come into the studio and ask questions at the mic as well. Candidates have up to 3 minutes to answer a question. We have a timekeeper, who is not me, who will be signaling our candidates when their time is up. We ask for safety and space reasons that we only have 3 people standing right at the mic at any given time waiting to ask a question. And also, please note that different candidates can answer the same question, but not from the same person. And one other thing, please remember to ask questions, not make statements. Our candidates here are here to answer your questions, and if you ask questions, they'll be able to give you answers. If you make statements, it will be very difficult for them to answer questions, because it is not a question. And with that, let's get started. I'll be introducing the candidates, and the first candidate I'm introducing is Yolanda Greaves. Yolanda Greaves is currently in her 2nd term on the Ashland Board of Selectmen, 2 years of which she was the chair. Prior to her time on the Board of Selectmen, she was elected twice to the Ashland School Committee, where she served 1 year as chair and 1 year as vice chair. Yolanda is currently an executive board member of the Metro West Regional Collaborative, a member of the Liaison Committee, and a member of the Pond Street Working Group. Yolanda is also a member of the Safe Routes to School Committee. Previously, she was on the Board of Selectmen. She was the Board of Selectmen representative to the Joint Fire Committee for Ashland and Hopkinton. She has been a member of the Space and Enrollment Committee, the School Strategic Plan Committee, and the most recent, a small software firm. She has been a dance teacher and choreographer and has managed dance and theater productions for over 30 years. Yolanda served as the inaugural chair of the Massachusetts Dance Festival for its first 3 years. She is an award-winning producer of Around the Clock, a news show here that she hosts on WACA-TV. Ladies and gentlemen, Yolanda Greaves. Thank you.
Thank you, Makita, for hosting this forum and inviting me to participate. Also, thank you to my fellow candidates. I look forward to some lively discussion, not between us, but maybe from some questions that we get. I'm here to let you know that my diverse background in government, private sector, and the arts makes me an ideal candidate for state rep for 7th Middlesex District. I have been a public servant in Ashland for over 15 years, and I have served on various boards and committees here in town. As Makita mentioned, I'm currently on the Board of Selectmen. I'm in my 2nd term. I have spent 2 years as chair. I am currently the clerk. While I've been on the Board of Selectmen, we've done some really great things here in Ashland. A major initiative that I was able to bring to Ashland was the Community Compact, which was created by the Baker and Polito and the Community Compact is a program where communities can pick 3 issues or 3 things that they'd like to work on, 3 best practices. I found out about this program. I brought it back to our Board of Selectmen. I stressed with our board as well as our town manager and assistant town manager at the time that we participate. We wound up being the 10th community to sign on to the Community Compact, and because of that, we've received $30,000 in grant money to review our capital process here in Ashland, which has needed some improvements. We also were given grant money to work on our Safe Routes to School program, which was also one of the other best practices that we decided to follow up on. And another initiative that I've brought to Ashland was the Complete Streets. Again, I was at a meeting, I heard about it, I brought it back. Some other members had been aware, but we pushed it through and we wrote a policy. We passed it back last year, and this past March, it was rated number 7 in the nation for complete streets policies. So these are 2 initiatives that I was able to find, bring back, work with the rest of the Board of Selectmen, and get initiated and processed here in Ashland. I've also initiated a public outreach project, and this was when I was chair. If you live here in Ashland, we have our farmers market every Saturday. And one of the things that I felt was important was that as selectmen, we go out and we meet with people. We meet people every day, but in a formal time. So we were at the farmers market, someone from the Board of Selectmen, every Saturday for the first year that we did it. Then I decided and presented to the rest of the board that it would be great if we could have other committees that are here in Ashland go and do the same thing. So now we're in our 2nd year of this. Members of our Board of Health, our school committee, all the boards and committees that we have here in Ashland take a turn and show up at the farmers market for people to be able to talk to them, talk about initiatives, talk about issues, and for these boards and committees to let people know what they're doing. Ashland is really a great community in regards to volunteerism, and I appreciate and applaud everyone who volunteers, and I like to support that. My private sector background that will help me as state rep, I am the finance manager and HR manager for a small software firm. So I'm very familiar with the needs and issues that small business is dealing with, trying to work and create jobs and create wealth here in Massachusetts. I've also have a background in arts, and that I've taught levels and all different levels and ages of students, and I've worked in a lot of different facilities, and I manage not only the students, but I've been able to manage major productions in that role. Now, this diverse background allows me to bring a very creative, out-of-the-box thinking perspective to my role as state rep. So as I mentioned, we brought the Community Compact in. I was able to find that initiative, bring it forward, and work with my fellow board to bring it forward. In regards to budget review, development, and implementation, my ability to work with and encourage appropriate policies. Since I've been on the board, our board has worked with our town management, and we've brought forward 3 policies so that financially Ashland is in one of the best positions that it's been. We have a better reserve than we've had in many years. As with any town, things change and ebb and flow, but right now, with the work of the board and with our town management, we've been able to put us in a better position. The issues that I am looking at to address that I think are very important to many people are fiscal responsibility and accountability. We need to ensure that our tax dollars are not only being used appropriately, but that when they get put into specific programs, that those programs that need them get them. But then when they're being used in those programs, that we really monitor and are aware of waste and fraud.
I'm sorry.
And I just saw that I had my time to finish. I did not get as much as I thought.
We're
Anyway.
going to have to finish on that thought. But
Okay.
actually, the good news is that now you're able to take questions from the audience. So
Okay.
if someone has a question for Yolanda Greaves, we ask at this time, please to step up to the microphone and ask your question.
Excuse me, I can ask another question if somebody else. I noticed you spoke only about Ashland, and you didn't mention Framingham in any way. Why should we elect you?
So the experience that I've earned and learned about in Ashland, I look forward to bringing that to Framingham, and later in my notes, and I had more points than I thought for 5 minutes, I've already reached out to your public works director, your town manager, to start learning about the issues that you're dealing with. I am very strong and supportive of transportation and infrastructure. Right now, Framingham is in the process of working on 90 different road projects, as well as all your water and sewer issues. One of those projects is on the TIP, which is the federal money that comes down to different communities, and that is on for 2021. I've been able to push and work on our Route 126 project here in Ashland and make sure that it stayed on the TIP for 2020. So as a state rep, my goal would be to help foster and continue that relationship that I have created with the MPO and ensure that those dollars, especially the new project that's on your tip for 2021, would stay on that list. I admit I still have to learn a lot about Framingham. I have been canvassing and talking to people and finding out what the issues are. I've spoken to your your senior center director, and she has let me know some of the things that you're facing there. And I wanted to talk about my experience and how I can take that experience up to the State House, and I would work fully both for Ashland and for Framingham. Even though my experience has been in Ashland, I feel that should I be the state rep, I would represent both of them equally.
We have another question.
Yes, thank you. I'm just curious to know who will you be supporting in the presidential election and why?
At this point, I don't feel I have a real candidate for president. Unfortunately, I'm not happy with either candidate, and at this point, I don't know what I'll be doing. I feel that both candidates have their negative issues, and I'm still deciding that.
Do we have another question for Yolanda Greaves? I think we're all set.
Oh, someone
Oh,
just getting
no,
up?
we got somebody with one more question. I'm sorry.
That's
Saw
okay.
that before I did.
What is your position on gun control, please?
I feel that we have to enforce the gun control laws that we currently have in place and review and decide what else we need to do before we start making drastic changes. We do need to do something based on some of the issues that we've had, but I feel we need to enforce what we have in place.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that's really it.
Great.
So thank you very much, Yolanda.
Thank you, Makita.
Up next is Jack Patrick Lewis. Jack Patrick Lewis is a progressive Democrat seeking Representative Santacandro's soon-to-be vacated seat in the 7th Middlesex District. Lewis currently leads a local nonprofit for at-risk teens, which provides supportive services through youth empowerment and community education. He formerly served as a minister of a local Unitarian congregation where he led youth on service trips from Guatemala to West Virginia and preached on social and economic justice every chance he could. Lewis has also spent time serving his communities as a substitute Head Start preschool teacher, working as a habituation assistant for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and working with people recently released from prison to re-enter society. Lewis has dedicated his entire life, both personal and professional, to community advocacy, and is looking to take his passion to the legislative level for Ashland and Framingham. Jack Patrick Lewis.
So I first wanted to thank Ashland Cable Access for providing us this opportunity to speak and introduce ourselves today. In less than a month, there's the Democratic primary, and this year it's on a Thursday, September 8th. And Democrats and independents in Ashland and Framingham will have an important choice to make. Which one of the Democratic candidates will be the candidate to go against our good friend Yolanda here in November? Which one of the candidates will best advocate for our community's needs moving forward? I'm running for state representative because I know that my diverse experiences and my steadfast commitment to the shared values that many of us have make me that candidate. Many of us know and have got to know Representative Tom St. Nicandro well over his 12 years of serving our communities at the State House. In those 12 years, he has brought our voices to the State House, advocating for our schools, our families, and our larger community. But Tom has done something that not every state rep does or does well. He has successfully brought voices of people that are not traditionally heard at levels of power. Tom has ensured that working families, children and youth, people with disabilities, and our thriving local businesses are heard, and I would be honored to continue that legacy. Over these last couple months of campaigning, I have been honored to be endorsed by many of the same organizations and unions that have endorsed Tom through all of his campaigns. Organizations that feel that my candidacy is best to carry that same mantle forward. As at last count, we have secured 11 statewide and national organizational and union endorsements. The National Organization for Women, who feels that my campaign is best equipped to advocate for paid family medical leave and ensuring confidentiality around healthcare decisions. The United Auto Workers Union, that knows that my campaign is the best to advocate for a fair and living wage for all of our citizens. Mass Equality, that knows that my campaign is the best to lead the Commonwealth forward in continuing our fight to ensure justice under the law for all citizens. And the Progressive Democrats of Massachusetts, who know that my campaign is the best to advocate for green energy jobs and the expanding of affordable, accessible health care in our Commonwealth. Moving our Commonwealth forward has long been what has dictated every decision I have made, and will fuel my service to all of you as your full-time state rep. My first job, as Makita said, was serving as a habitation assistant in a group home for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. After that, I served and lived in diverse communities around the world, serving as a substitute teacher, tutoring in jails, and working with people recently released from prison. It was fueled by that same passion that I ultimately went to seminary in order to lend my voice to social and economic issues, most recently serving a local Unitarian church. It was in that capacity, as a community minister, that I convened a group of community leaders together, parents, therapists, and teachers, in order to reflect on how our communities could both best welcome and support all of our youth. It was through leading this organization as its executive director that I've been able to work with over 700 middle and high school youth from Ashland, from Framingham, and from every town that connects these beautiful towns. It's been in this capacity that I've been able to work with teachers and parents in order to make sure that all of our homes and all of our schools are safe, and work with elected officials to ensure that our Commonwealth continues to be that shining city on a hill that its founders first imagined. But this election isn't really about me or any of us and our long list of accomplishments. It's about you and the issues that are important to your families. It's about our schools. It's about our town's success. This town is about which one of us will best advocate for quality, affordable health care. Which one of us will help us secure jobs that pay well with sensible, fair tax policies so that all one day we're able to retire with dignity. As your state rep, I will fight day in and day out to ensure that all children are supported, all families feel hope for their family's future, and all residents enjoy a fairer and more prosperous tomorrow. Over the last 9 months, I have spoken with thousands of residents of Ashland and Framingham. I've met with our community's leaders, and it has been made further clear to me that the issues that are important to all of you and our communities are the issues that are important to me. These are the issues I will advocate for as your state representative, and on Thursday, September 8th, I'd be honored to have your vote. Thank you.
Question time for Mr. Lewis.
So my name is Drubas, and I represent the Brady campaign in Massachusetts. So I would like to know if you support the Attorney General's explanation and re-explanation of the assault weapons ban. If no, why no? And if yes, what would you do to help the Attorney General enforce the assault weapons ban? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So I 100% stand behind our Attorney General in trying to ensure that our schools and our streets are safe. This is the new decision from the Attorney General's office restricting copycat sales of weapons of war that should not be on our streets, should not be in our homes. We all live in 2016. We all have TVs. Our phones are constantly going off with news blasts. You don't know where the next shooting will be. We all go to school or have gone to schools. Many of us attend places of worship. All of us at one time or another have been in the mall. The reality is that the accessibility to weapons of war in our streets, and in some cases in stores down the road from where we may live, makes it harder to keep our communities safe. So I applaud the Attorney General in trying to keep our community safe. As a Commonwealth, we need to lead the way for the rest of the country. And as leaders in the Commonwealth, we have an obligation to work with leaders in neighboring states as well, because we can have really great laws here, but if Connecticut or Rhode Island allow the sale of weapons of war, they can easily cross our borders. So the Attorney General has my support, and I will lend my voice whenever appropriate to restricting weapons of war from the hands of the average person.
Next question for Mr. Lewis.
Hi, Jack. My name is Steve Mitchell. I serve on the Ashland Board of Selectmen. I commend you for an impressive resume, but one thing I do notice is a lack of government experience, and that's concerning to me. Serving as a selectman, my experience is a steep learning curve, and I would imagine even steeper for a state rep. So my question to you is, convince me that you can be effective essentially from day one without having that type of experience and background.
No, thank you for that question, and I applaud your work on the Board of Selectmen and everyone who's served on all these important committees and boards in our towns. You are correct. I am a member of the Framingham Democratic Town Committee, where I serve as the Affirmative Action and Outreach Officer. While I have interned in political offices, while I have volunteered on campaigns, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, this will be my first position running for elected, my first successful time running for elected office. I'm of the opinion that leadership comes in a variety of different forms. Serving a congregation as a minister brings with it its own form of leadership. Starting, running, leading a nonprofit is its own form of leadership, and that there are plenty of successful politicians at the State House who went different routes, who, being a state rep, may have been their first foray into elected office, but with their experience running a nonprofit, managing a family, helping to manage a church, they bring that experience with them. I'm unapologetic of who I am and what I bring. I have traveled the world, lived in diverse communities. To the State House, I will bring a diverse perspective on things. And I think no matter which one of us is elected, you're right, there is going to be a steep learning curve. And each of us, depending on our backgrounds, is going to have other things to learn. What I'm going to bring is the ability to work in very diverse communities, the knowledge that leadership isn't always the one who's out front with a podium or a megaphone, but sometimes leadership is the leadership you learn running a congregation or running a nonprofit, that sometimes you have to lead from the side or prod from behind to really get work done. I would be honored to represent the wonderful, beautiful towns of Ashland and Framingham, and what I bring is my diverse experience to the job. So thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have another question for Jack?
Yes. You recently wrote in the Daily News, the Metro West Daily News, about the apartment complexes going up near the Nyanza site. And I would like to know if this is something that should be of interest to people outside of this community, and if so, what do you plan to do with it if you become our representative?
It's a great question. So Nyanza is something that we've been talking about as I've interacted with voters over the last 9 months at length. And my answer to them is first to listen to the stories and then to respond the same way I always have. The stories that have been shared to me are sad. Meeting with and speaking with people who have lost kids to rare forms of cancer, who have lost many, many classmates to rare forms of cancer directly connected to the Nyanza spill are stories that have shaped my perspective on this issue. I was happy to attend the unveiling of the memorial near the Nyanza site and to hear more of these stories as part of a healing ceremony. You're right. In the article, I wrote that we need to continue to work with the environmental agencies to make sure that all future construction in Ashland is done in a responsible way. But the stories I have heard have shown me that the only responsible thing to do is to halt current construction. As somebody who's been hearing this and learning from people who have been touched by this issue, for me that's the only responsible answer I think I can give, is to advocate that we can take a deep breath, we continue to reflect, and we figure out what now to do moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Next candidate to speak is Phil Jack. Phil grew up in a typical 1970s middle-class household. His dad had a good union job with the telephone company, and his mother worked hard, raising 4 rambunctious children until eventually she became a public school teacher later in life. Although they didn't have a lot, that single good-paying job allowed Phil and his siblings to attend college. Immediately after graduating from Williams College in Williamstown, Massachusetts, Phil moved to Washington, D.C. to pursue his passion for government and politics. During that time, he worked for a congressman on Capitol Hill, an environmental group, a presidential candidate in the '92 election, and ran a state Senate campaign. But most importantly, Phil met his future wife, Heather, while in D.C. However, Phil also had a strong interest in the private sector, so he attended law school and founded his own law firm after graduating from BC Law. Phil has been a business owner for the past 20 years and is proud to have created dozens of jobs during that time. Phil and Heather moved to Ashland in early 2000 and have loved raising their 2 children, Lizzie and Alex, here in beautiful Metro West. Both Phil and Heather believe in giving back to their community, and so both have volunteered extensively. In addition to coaching for 9 years, Phil has spent hundreds of hours on nearly a dozen town and regional boards and committees, including serving as a selectman, being a founding member of the Metro West Regional Transit Authority, and the chair of the Ashland Zoning Board of Appeals. Phil Jack.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, big thank you to Makita and WACA for hosting this this forum tonight, and to all of you for taking time out of your, I'm sure, busy schedules to attend. My name is Phil Jack, and I am running to be the next state representative for the towns of Ashland and Framingham. And of course, I'm asking for your vote on September 8th. And I'm running because I believe that although government isn't going to be the answer to every problem that we face, it does have a positive and important role to play in addressing some of the most important issues, and primarily in creating the social and the economic and the political system within which we can all succeed, that everyone has the chance to succeed. And today, in today's world, sort of post-Great Recession, I think that means focusing squarely on rebuilding and protecting the middle class at every generation. And so what do I mean by that, at every generation? So for people who are currently in the workforce, that means first making sure that every job pays a living wage, not just a minimum wage, but a living wage. If you work full-time in Massachusetts, you should not live in poverty, period. But the reality is we can't just aspire to create more minimum wage jobs, even if they are a living wage. We need to continue to create great jobs in Massachusetts in new economy industries like high-tech, clean tech, biotech. And so if elected, I will be a steadfast partner with Senator Spilka, who's been spearheading this effort in the state Senate to make sure that Massachusetts remains one of the leaders in those key industries. And Metro West in particular hosts many of those key jobs. For future generations, what does this mean? Well, we have got to once and for all fully fund our public education, and not just K through 12, but early education and higher education. Because as many of you know, it's education that has always been and will always be the sure path to the middle class. And so while I'm hesitant to support any new taxes, I do support the millionaire's tax. And that's because, frankly, the state just doesn't have the revenue to adequately fund education. But the millionaire's tax The way that will work is that it will only tax annual revenue above $1 million. So really it just taxes the wealthiest residents here in Massachusetts. But it would raise enough revenue to not only fully fund education, but to finally pay for needed repairs in our infrastructure, in our roads, and our public transportation. And then finally, we've got to do a better job at taking care of our retirees. I mean, these are people who have worked hard their entire lives, have attained middle-class status, but are now struggling on fixed incomes. And we can do more. We can expand property tax relief, which, by the way, will be easier if we pass the millionaire's tax. But we also have to finally get health care and housing costs under control. So that's what I believe in, and that's what I'm going to do and what I'll focus on if elected. But let me just speak frankly for a moment here, because I've been a voter a lot longer than I've been a candidate. And as a voter, I don't put a whole lot of stock in campaign rhetoric and campaign promises, because like many of you, I've seen way too many campaign promises broken over the years. And so what I urge you to do, what I do as a voter, is, sure, I listen, I like a good political speech as much as the next guy, but I want to know what you've done as a candidate. You know, prove to me that you actually believe in what you're saying. And so, because let's face it, it's easy to say the right things during a campaign, particularly in a polarized political system like we have right now. You almost have to try to say the wrong things. And so I urge you to look at someone's record. And so in my case, I didn't just suddenly wake up one day when this seat became vacant and decide that good government was important to me. I've been working in government and politics for the last 25 years. As my bio pointed out, I've sat on almost a dozen boards and committees, and am the only candidate in the primary to have been elected to public office. The other important thing to focus on is who supports you, and I'm very proud of my endorsements. All of my endorsements come from people that you all have elected and trust to represent you. I'm supported by 9 either current or former selectmen, divided almost evenly between the 2 towns, members of Planning Board, Conservation Commission, zoning boards. In addition, I'm supported by former State Treasurer Steve Grossman and Congressman McGovern. But most importantly, I'm the only candidate in this race who's supported by people who have held this position in the past. 2 of the past state representatives for Ashland and Framingham have endorsed me and are working very hard to make sure that I'm elected. And that's because they know that I will be the most effective representative for our communities on Beacon Hill. And so again, I'm down to 3 seconds. I ask you for your vote and your support on September 8th. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for Phil Jack this evening?
So I'm here again. So, Black Lives Matter. So that just as a concept, I'm not talking about the organization or the hashtag, but just these 3 powerful words, Black Lives Matter. Where do you stand on Black Lives Matter?
I know you're not allowed to have follow-up questions, but can he clarify that at all?
No, there's no follow-up question.
Okay, so
There are no follow-up questions.
Well, so, I mean, I agree, first of all, that Black lives matter, all lives matter, and I think, hopefully everyone in this room agrees with that. And so, if the context of your question is, how do I view the seeming violence of police against the minority community, it's a serious issue, and look, as a selectman, and those of us who have served as selectmen in town, we know our police force very well, and they're just incredibly good people on our police force. So I want to make it clear that I'm not accusing every police officer of misconduct, but I think, you can't ignore what's going on out there in some areas, and there are some bad apples out there, and it's a serious problem, one that needs to be addressed and can't be swept under the rug. And, as a state legislator, I could be wrong, but I don't think we've had those types of incidents too much in Massachusetts. But if it did, I would definitely be a strong voice against that and for positive reform.
Can I give you this wristband?
Of course. Thank
I don't know if that's technically a follow-up
It's not.
question, but anyway. Do we have another question for Phil Jack this evening?
Wow, okay.
I think I actually
Okay, great.
Fantastic.
So, my name's Alice Schmid, and
Hi,
I've
Alice.
only lived in Ashland for about a year and a half.
Okay.
And I'm originally from Chicago, so I grew up with tons of machine politics, and it's made everyone in Chicago who's ever been familiar with it very cynical about politicians. And you sort of invited this question, and I'm probably addressing it to all of you. But where do you get your money for the campaign? Like who, it's one thing to endorse
Sure.
someone, it's something else entirely to accept money. So I'm wondering who you've accepted money from, and will you be serving any special interests as a legislator?
So it's a fair question, always. Just friends and family, So, I'm blessed to have a very wide group of friends and family.
We have time for one more question for Phil Jack.
Yeah, my name is Bob Young.
Hi, Bob.
And I was at the first debate, and during that first debate, I know that you didn't take a position on recreational marijuana.
Yeah.
And do you have a position on that now?
It came up earlier today as well, and I'll be honest, I'm still struggling a bit with that. If I had to vote on it, which I will soon, I would probably vote for passage. But I am concerned about the potency of current marijuana, and the fact that I've got 2 young children, so it's a concern that this could turn into a gateway drug for our youth. But stepping back, big picture, do I think socially it's worse than alcohol? In my mind, absolutely not. Alcohol is, if you look at it statistically, is a much more dangerous drug. So, and decriminalization, I think, is important for criminal justice for that. So I see both sides of the argument. I'm not there yet on how we should implement it. And I'm also concerned with how the medical marijuana initiative was implemented or misimplemented. And so if we're going to take that step, we need to be very careful, make sure we're actually fully prepared for its implementation. And I know Colorado has had their issues, and we should check out Denver and some other areas of the country before we jump in.
Thank you, Phil. Our last candidate of the evening is Brett Walker. Brett Walker is the candidate of Action, Energy, and Innovation. During his campaign, Brett Walker has succeeded in bringing attention to some of the most pressing matters affecting quality of life in Metro West, and he has proposed ambitious and novel improvements to those issues. Brett seeks to leverage his experience as a state prosecutor and recently announced top 40 attorney under the age of 40 in America, 16 years of military service and community involvement to continue this work. Certainly, Brett's is a kinetic campaign dedicated to decisiveness and transparency. If elected state representative, Brett will seek to expand the role of state legislator beyond statutes and budget concerns to community leader. This is a role for which Brett is well qualified. From his youth to present, Brett has always stood out as a strong leader. Captain of football, wrestling, and rugby teams, military commander in Afghanistan and Iraq, church deacon, National Guard Association Executive Board member, Worcester Rugby Club Executive Board member, chair of the Democratic Town Committee, supervisor for specialty court. These are some of the leadership positions Brett has held and in which he has developed a capacity to form tight teams and accomplish complex goals. Brett is an avid student of governance. He is well-versed in philosophy related to governance as he studied at West Point and Boston College Law School and as a Rappaport Fellow in Law and Public Policy. He is likewise experienced in real-world implementation of governance at the city level, such as advising the municipal government of Baghdad, to the national level, such as his liaison duties with the Paraguayan government on behalf of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Ladies and gentlemen, Brett Walker.
So let me tell you a little bit how this campaign's gone so far. The campaign kickoff was scheduled for February at the far eastern end of Framingham. And wouldn't you know it, that very day, the sudden onset of the most severe storm of the season hit. 7 inches of snow hit in just a few hours on the very day that we were supposed to be doing this, and we didn't really have a whole lot of notice that this was going to happen. Sometime thereafter, we sent out our first mailing, and due to some sort of transmission error, a bunch of the letters got sent to the wrong addresses. Even my most we had a couple successful things, then even my most recent mailing, for whatever reason, it got shipped out of some union shop in Shrewsbury, goes right past Ashland and Framingham, goes to some regional distribution office in Boston, sits there for a while, and is now slowly trickling in over these past 2 weeks. Some of it has not yet arrived 2 weeks later. Let me tell you about my signs that keep getting stolen, which is creating a problem because they're kind of popular. I'm having trouble keeping up with demand as it is. Now they're getting stolen. I won that award by the American Bar Association as a top 40 lawyer in America under the age of 40. It's the first time they've ever done this. I was the only prosecutor in the entire country that received the award. And I wrote up this great press release with some photographs. And, of course, it ends up in the spam folder of all the local newspapers. By the time they figured out what had happened, it was not timely news anymore, and it got buried in the business report of the newspaper. And, yeah, by the way, this morning when I was in court, I threw my shoulders back and my button went popping off. Now, listen, I've got to, I knew I had to come straight here from court. I am still working because I'm still, providing for a family and everything. Right, Bob? I got my father-in-law here. He's like, yeah, you got to make sure you're providing for that family. But, so I came straight here from work, and now I've got no button on. So on the train, I'm like trying to sew it up and draw black markers on it because it's white thread. So you ask me how the campaign's going? Fantastic. It's going fantastic, and let me tell you why. That day that we got 7 inches of snow, we still got 70 bodies in that door, beset by 7 inches of snow on the far eastern side of Framingham. 70 bodies nonetheless. That mailing that went out, both the mailings went out. Every time I call up my supporters and say, hey, guess what? Mailings got botched. Can you help out? And they do. The very first time I got almost 20 volunteers to turn out. Not quite 20, almost 20 volunteers to turn out. And we had a power hour, and in the matter of just a few hours, we hit hundreds of doors, and boy, that was better than any mailing anyway. This most recent weekend, this last weekend, I put 30 volunteers to work. 30 volunteers in one day. Oh, I'm sorry, one weekend. And that doesn't even count people who are away on vacation and injured and sick. There's actually a lot of them, and that's kind of sad. But anyway, the signs, hey, I'm glad somebody's liking them. I envision them, courage, character, commitment, Brett Walker over somebody's mantelpiece. Whatever, any press is good press, I suppose. And that ABA award, that's all right. Boston College Magazine wrote up an article on it, wrote up a magazine article on it. We posted on the website, drove 4,000 people to our website and Facebook. And the button, I told you how I fixed the button. So that's how the campaign's going. It's fantastic. And why do I bring this all up? Because it shows the kind of person I am and the kind of state representative I'm going to be. A problem solver. A crisis manager. Because, it's kind of what I do in my civilian job also. I'm a state prosecutor, and let me tell you, you know what the best state prosecutors are? The ones that can come up with universally appealing solutions. Not who gets the most convictions. Sometimes that's kind of easy. Some of these crooks are pretty dumb. The issue is who can find the best societal solution. That's what I did throughout this campaign. That's what I'm going to do as a state representative. I'm a professional problem solver, and I want to bring that skill set to Framingham and to Ashland. I want to talk, and I want to make clear, I am here to change the dialogue, not to appease the establishment, all right? Not part of the establishment, don't want to be. I want to be an innovator. I want to be something new and progressive. I want to change what we're talking about here in Massachusetts. I want to change how we're talking about public school funding, criminal justice. I want to change how we talk about environmental health and veteran homelessness and substance abuse and social work. I want to change the dialogue on all those things, not maintain the status quo. I want to talk about partnerships. I look around and I see all sorts of great partnerships that do seem to be working very well around here. I see the 495 partnership. I see the Metro West Regional Collaborative. I see the Metropolitan Area Planning Committee. The point is, and I don't sit on any of these. I think Yolanda does, I think. But I don't sit on any of these. But I see that they are successful, and I'm anxious to be involved with them. I do partnership. I haven't been on any of these, but I do partnerships. In fact, I was the manager of the Massachusetts State Partnership Program. It has partnership right in its name. That's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about being a full-time representative and exercising those partnerships and those new dialogues.
We're going to have to cut you off.
Hit me. All right. And I want to take questions. Do we have questions?
And, you know, we do have hopefully we do have questions. If anyone's interested in asking Mr. Walker a question, please approach the mic.
And, you know, going along with the whole tragedy story, like, how come I don't get my photo and website up here? Was it up? Oh, okay, all right.
You were
I
talking.
got the photo.
Brett, I'll ask a question. You know, my big interest is education. And of course, education, especially public education, is the engine that drives the Commonwealth's economy. So with that, you as a state rep, how do you think you could improve and support public education?
So education is one of the most important things in my campaign. It's one of the most important things in my life. I'm the product of the public education program, public education system myself. My wife's a public school teacher. My kids are in the public school system. It is extremely important to me, and its empowerment is the most important, one of the most important functions that a state representative can do. So what can a state representative can do? What will I do? Number one, I want to readdress this Chapter 70 funding formula, all right? And listen, we've been blessed that we have had some of the greatest champions of public education funding in, I don't know, probably the Commonwealth's history, all right? Between Tom Santacandro and Karen, did everybody just see Karen Spilka just brought in like another like $400,000 or whatever to Ashland Education? Like, you know, that woman knows how to get funding for this program. Boy, I'd love to support her and help her on that. And of course, Rep. Santacandro, always out on the front edge. I'm going to be doing the same thing. Listen, these are some things I want to look at with the Chapter 70 funding. I want to look at lowering the caps for some of the most affluent societies. Right now, it's capped around 10%. I think that should be about 5%. You know what? Hey, you know what? Your Welsleys and your Dover Sherver and stuff, I don't necessarily know if they need 10% state funding. Maybe they can come up with them themselves. I'd say Framingham and Ashland need a little bit more. I'd like to readjust that cap funding there. I'd like to address the way that we calculate land value, especially in places like Ashland and Framingham, which have surprisingly a large number of apartments, actually. You know, in Ashland, you know, we got Algonquin Trail, we got Captain Eames, we got Mountain Gate, we've got Spyglass Hill, right? So those are flawing the property valuation, and they're flawing how we calculate Chapter 70 funding. If those are readdressed, we will get better resources here in Framingham and in Ashland. And Framingham's got it actually probably worse than Ashland. I'd like to ensure that we have a cap on charter schools too, all right? Charter schools disproportionately allocate resources to public schools. What we need to do is be empowering and fixing the public schools as they are, not creating like this weird parallel program. And finally, I'd really like to re-examine standardized testing, all right? Standardized testing takes a huge amount of time. I'm not totally sure it's providing great data, and it also, in a way, discourages some of the most talented teachers from taking on some of the most challenging students in their classes. I'd say that we need to do those three things to empower public education. And of course, I do have a great deal of respect for the highly qualified teachers of Massachusetts, and I think that we need to diminish the amount of state and federal control over the curriculums.
Another question for Brett?
Yes. As a resident of Framingham, why should I support a candidate from Ashland?
Well, the first reason is because I'm the most qualified for this position. I have a lot of energy, a lot of ideas, and I've got a lot of ability to work with across the aisle. Because listen, it's important. Here's an important thing to remember. Here's an important thing to remember. We right now have a Republican executive administration. So one of the things you have to examine is who's going to be able to work simultaneously with the Democratic legislative leadership and the Republican executive leadership. So number one, because I'm the one capable of doing that, because I hold a unique position that will allow me. Number two, and probably more importantly from Framingham's perspective, is I've never actually thought of it as Ashland and then Framingham, because it's important to understand, I didn't grow up here. I moved here as an adult. And as a result, I don't have like any sort of Homer bias here. It's not Ashland over everybody else. For me, it's always been Ashland and Framingham. From the first day I showed up here, and I almost immediately got involved with the state Democratic, got involved with politics in some extent here, so I always saw it as Framingham and Ashland. I don't really distinguish, although I know I'm standing here saying that and there's no Framingham flag here, but understand we're at the WACA studios in Ashland. I'd say that during the course of this campaign, I probably spent more time in Framingham than I've actually spent in Ashland, ensuring that I'm familiarizing myself with the most important issues to the people of Framingham. Also, you just heard me lecture and rant on about Chapter 70 funding and about public education. Listen, Framingham needs this more than Ashland, all right? Framingham, I recognize the dire situation in Framingham and how important it is for us to address the public school thing. Because not only do they need this Chapter 70 overhaul, they also, listen, they've got Keefe Tech there. What a great place Keefe Tech is. You guys remember like 2 years ago, President Obama came down to speak at Worcester Tech to talk about what great programs these tech schools are. Keefe Tech is a great program. I'd love to empower that and ensure that we're getting great guys, getting great folks to get great training for great jobs, and also prepared for college, because many Keefe Tech folk end up at college because they're very talented and intelligent people. And then, of course, Mass Bay, the community college, got all sorts of great ideas about programs I'd like to implement. I think I'm about to run out of time, but great programs that I'd like to implement that. And, of course, one of the very first things I did upon starting this campaign was said, I need a campaign manager from Framingham because I want to make sure that my campaign is equally represented. So my campaign manager is a Framingham State kid, very familiar with all the issues there.
I am going to say, though, that I'm going to apologize to you, Brett, because even though you didn't go over time, the question that was asked was actually very similar to, not the same exact question, but it was very similar to the question that you had asked earlier. So I just wanted to point that out. Like I said, it wasn't the exact same question, but it was very similar, and that's why we allowed it. But I just wanted to caution folks that, well, we have our last question. So make sure it's not that question. Last question.
I think I only answered it in a way that was similar, because the question was, one was about education, one was about Framingham versus Ashland. Right?
True. It was very similar. So
I weave my theories together.
Brett, could you talk a little bit about how you would advocate for women's health issues, and particularly women's right to choose?
As to women's health issues, the women's health issues thing first. Once again, as a prosecutor, I have dealt with issues of domestic violence and sexual assault. And I've actually got a bunch of great ideas that kind of falls into the criminal justice reform realm. So if you want to see specifically what I've been thinking about as pertains to domestic violence and sexual assault, go to my website. It's electbrett.us, and go to the platform, and you'll see I've got a whole paper there written about criminal justice reform, and there's a whole section in there about how we can fix the laws to keep the home safer for domestic violence. Now, that's not to say that all domestic violence victims or sexual assault victims are women, because they're not, but it is a disproportionate amount, so I think that's something important. I could visit them right now, but I'll feel I'll run out of time again. But please go to the website, look at platforms, look at criminal justice reform. You'll see a whole section on all sorts of great things we can do, including 24-hour mandatory stay away from the house after domestic violences and stuff like that. As to women's right to choose. Now, listen, this is a really interesting, okay, so of course I'm in favor of a woman's right to choose. I just want to make that very clear first. So it doesn't sound like as though I'm couching everything else in rhetoric. Now, the big issue, the big threat on the women's right to choose issue right now is, it seems to me, is where and when and how people can protest certain clinics or operations or events. So what you do here is you have to apply something called the O'Brien test, all right? So, in fact, you know what? Here's the answer to this. I spent a lot of time studying the Constitution. For whatever reason, for whatever ill-advised reason, when I was in law school, I took a bunch of constitutional law classes, and it turns out there's no jobs in that unless you're like on the Supreme Court. I think President Obama was a constitutional lawyer, so maybe we'll go there next if this doesn't work out for me. But in any event, I'm very familiar with the Constitution. I'm familiar with its interpretations, how and when it can be applied, and that's the important thing to understand here. There is a constitutional right to make yourself heard and get your message out there for the people who are pro-life, and I respect that. What I do not respect is them misunderstanding the appropriateness of it, because you can't put a woman, or anybody, but you can't put a woman in fear for her safety, and you can't try to publicly humiliate individuals These are the things that we have to be watching for in the future. So what we have right now, oh geez, I'm sorry. Okay, so we have to have very clear lines, and also we have to be proactive with laws that prevent people from using the internet and electronic means to intimidate or embarrass women who are seeking to exercise their choice. Sorry.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to thank all of our candidates for participating this evening. Yolanda Greaves, Jack Patrick Lewis, Phil Chack, and Brett Walker. Can we please give them a round of applause? I'd like to thank you, the audience here in studio, and you, the audience at home watching this right now. If you're inclined to support a particular candidate, please contact their campaign and get involved. Our primary day is Thursday, September 8th. So please make a note of that. It's a little unusual. But we'll also ask you to make a note of the fact that WACA will have live coverage of the results on primary night. So please tune in to WACA after you vote on September 8th. So until then, thank you again for contributing to this very important community forum. Thank you, audience here. Thank you, audience at home. So until September 8th, we'll see you later. Thank you so much. Policy Beast is it's a TV show, it's a podcast, it's apparently a Twitter account, and a whole bunch of other things that focuses in on public policy, and specifically how large public policy ideas impact us all in our day-to-day lives. Policy Beast is also about public service. It's about being involved in your community. It's about finding out what's going on in your community. Policy Beast is a tremendous way for you to connect with your community, and not just with your immediate community, but with your friends, your neighbors, your town, your city, your state, your country. That's what we strive to be. We range the gambit on Policy Beast. We've spoken to a lot of great local politicians, community-based organizations, and all sorts of folks who are out there trying to make a difference in their communities. We cover topics that are local to our hometown here, Ashland, but we also take a look at issues that impact us all statewide and nationally as well. So we have a lot of different topics that we try to cover, and we're always looking for suggestions on some things to do. Very recently, we've covered the Boston 2024 Olympic bid, which is something that impacts folks all across the state. We've talked to Mass Bike about the importance of transportation and policies around that. We've talked to local lawmakers like Tom Santacandro, representing Ashland and Framingham, and of course Mayor Seti Warren of Newton in Metro West. We've had the opportunity to interview a whole bunch of other folks on the show and other causes, and it's all just because we want to bring more awareness about these issues to the fore and get people talking about them, but more importantly, try to get people involved in these issues. We'd love to hear from you here at Policy Beast, and there are a lot of ways to get in touch with us. You can follow us on Twitter at PolicyBeastTV. We have a Facebook fan page. Look us up on Facebook. You can also email us at policybeasttv@gmail.com. So many ways to get in touch, and we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to hear about any kind of show ideas or any kind of topics that you'd like us to dive deep into.